30% capacity. The health department, however, still recommends virtual gatherings. Even if vaccine development has been making huge leaps, the UN says vaccination is not a panacea for the planet's ill. They expect the fallout from COVID-19 to last for decades. Another troubling milestone, global COVID death toll is now at 1.5 million. And as vaccination schemes begin, Pfizer is slashing production of its shots by half this year due to supply chain issues. And it's a big day for basketball fans. Ginebra and TNT are going at it for Game 3 of the PBA Finals. The FIBA Basketball World Cup has also revealed its logo for the 2023 tournament. The AFP wants to fire off another diplomatic protest against China. This has to do with an incursion that happened not in the South China Sea, but in the northern tip of Luzon, in waters that is part of our exclusive economic zone. We have with us tonight One News Defense and Security Editor Manny Mogato. Manny, what do we know of this latest incident?
Good evening, Robbie. There was a report from General Arnulfo Martelo Burgos that saying that a Chinese research vessel has entered the Philippine waters last September in Nicalayan Island in the northern Luzon. So they sent a Navy ship and a Navy aircraft uh, to notify the Chinese vessel that it was entering Philippine waters. And the Chinese crew told the Philippine military that they were just seeking refuge because of the bad weather situation during that time. But they told the Philippines that they will be leaving the area. So the next day, the Air Force and the Navy also sent another plane to look for the Chinese vessel, and they saw it still inside the Philippines 200-mile exclusive economic zone. The 60th time the Philippines has filed a diplomatic protest against China for violation of our EEZ, because most of the violations were done in the West Philippine Sea, but this time it's inside the Philippine territorial waters in northern Luzon, which is not a disputed area.
Okay. Now, Manny, given that this happened inside the EEZ, and given as well that this government does try to carry on with warm relations with China, beyond the diplomatic protest, how do we expect government to be handling this in the coming days?
Well, the Department of Foreign Affairs and the Department of National Defense have been on the offensive ever since President Duterte came into power. However, it's only Malacanang who is backpedaling on this issue because they wanted to create a warm and friendly relation with Beijing. However, since Secretary Teodoro Locsin was appointed secretary in 2018, he has been very, very aggressive in pursuing our claims, especially in the South China Sea or in the West Philippine Sea. So that's why there were already about 60 protests filed against China.
Okay.
But I think the whole situation will not worsen because the Philippines continue to be friendly with China, and the South China Sea is not the sum total of the bilateral relations between the two countries. It's only one of the irritants in the relation.
Okay, now, Manny, as you pointed out, this actually happened sometime in September, but it's coming to light now against the backdrop of military exercises as well in Zambales with the United States. Does that provide any kind of additional context or complication for this, or can those two basically take place in separate contexts?
It's a separate activity, Robbie. And the exercise in Zambales is not between the military and the United States of America. It's a unilateral exercise, but it's a joint exercise between the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force to test the interoperability of the three branches as well as to test and rehearse the defense plan in case of any contingency. So this week, we saw hundreds of Marines and soldiers raiding into beaches in Zambales to simulate uh, an event of retaking an island occupied by an imaginary third country. And according to Major General Edgar Arevalo, who was the executive director of the exercise, it was a successful activity. The activity is basically a defensive exercise for the Philippine Armed Forces.
Okay, maraming salamat, Manny Mogato, One News Defense and Security Editor. The military and suspected members of the Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters had an encounter last night. The group's attack has been labeled as an act of terror. Jem Avancenia reports to us live from Takurong in Sultan Kudarat. Jem, what's the situation over in Datu Piang now, and how are residents coping?
Robbie, residents of Datu Piang were alarmed after the attack of supposed members of Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters last night. There were no reported casualties, but the armed group burned down a police car. Residents of Datu Piang, Maguindanao woke up to shouting and sounds of gunfire on Thursday night. The exchange of gunfire can be heard in the cell phone video as residents took cover inside their houses. According to the AFP Western Mindanao Command, soldiers had an encounter with about 40 alleged members of the Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters or BIFF. Authorities said the group was trying to attack a military camp in Barangay Kanduan. The gun battle ended in a church along Datu Piang's town proper after the rebels were cornered by the PNP Regional Mobile Force Battalion. The group escaped by creating a diversion when it burned a police patrol vehicle.
Nagkaroon po ng almost 15 minutes na palitan ng putok. At habang ang ating tropa ay nagka-counter-attack, ay umatras ang mga bandidong BIFF at sila ay naghiwa-hiwalay sa iba-ibang direksyon.
No casualty had been reported in both sides. The AFP believes that the foiled terrorist attack is possibly an act of revenge after the BIFF was declared persona non grata in the whole of Mindanao.
It is a clear act of terror perpetrated by the BIFF. We have been receiving reports of harassments of security forces, our detachments of the AFP, detachments of the PNP are being harassed every now and then as part of the terroristic actions of the BIFF to sow terror in the area. Marawi is highly improbable at this point in time because we have already learned the lessons of Marawi, and we can consider what happened in Datu Piang as an isolated case, and it's really far from another Marawi incident.
In order to prevent a similar attack, tighter security had been implemented in Datu Piang and other parts of Maguindanao. Authorities also encouraged residents to immediately report any suspicious movement or presence of unknown individuals in the area.
Usually, they attack whenever we put our guards down, or when our vigilance is low. That's why they're always there, observing and really looking for the opportune time.
General Gapay also highlighted the importance of conducting joint military operations in maintaining high level of preparedness within the military. Maguindanao Governor Bay Maria Mangudadatu personally went to the crime scene this afternoon to check the situation. She said authorities are on top of things and that posts on social media about the attack were exaggerated.
Huwag po tayo magpanik dahil yung mga nakikita natin sa social media hindi po maigting po nagbabantay.
Robbie, military and police forces here in central Mindanao are now on heightened alert status after the attack last night. Pursuit operations against the perpetrators are also ongoing. And criminal charges for attempted murder, arson, and damage to property are also being prepared against the two BIFF leaders and their members who participated in the attack last night. Robbie?
Maraming salamat, Jem Avancenia, reporting live in Tacurong. The PNP says there are no persons of interest yet on the killing of Los Baños, Laguna Mayor Cesar Perez. Spokesperson Brigadier General Ildebrande Usana says investigators are now working to identify the suspects. Initial reports say that Perez was gunned down while walking toward the receiving area of the municipality as the possible motives for the crime. Perez was included in President Duterte's narco list back in 2019, which the mayor had staunchly denied. His younger brother was also killed by motorcycle-riding gunmen in 2017. In a statement, former Akbayan lawmaker Eta Rosales noted that Perez is the 20th local official to be killed under President Duterte's watch. We'll go for a quick break. When the big story returns, President Duterte repeats his call for equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines. He is also backing the UN call for a global ceasefire. And workshops may now be held in GCQ areas, but only at 30% capacity. We'll give you the guidelines next. Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. You're still watching The Big Story. As countries scramble to secure supplies of COVID-19 vaccines, President Duterte is calling on the United Nations to ensure that developing economies will have equal access to immunization. But the UN is warning that even with the vaccine,
vaccines. President Rodrigo Duterte renewed this call during the special session of the United Nations General Assembly. He insisted that leaving poor nations behind is clearly a gross injustice. The president expressed strong support for global medical and scientific initiatives forged by the World Health Organization.
If any country is excluded by reason of poverty or strategic unimportance, this gross injustice will haunt the world for a long time. It will completely discredit the values upon which the United Nations were founded. We cannot let this happen. No one is safe unless everyone is safe.
Duterte noted that this pandemic demands enhanced cooperation among nations. He declared the country's commitment in pooling global resources and helping other countries without preconditions.
Our first priority is to strengthen the capacity of health systems. Without a cure and a vaccine, we can only delay the spread of the disease while we reopen our economies.
However, Duterte also noted that the challenges posed by the pandemic go beyond health and economy, as it also threatens peace and security.
The lawless weaponized this health crisis, they cripple the state's ability to respond they leave COVID-19 to wreak its worst on the population.
With this, Duterte threw his support behind the UN's call for warring factions to lay down their arms while the world is facing this health crisis.
The Philippine support of Secretary General's report for global ceasefire is most welcome and appreciated.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres denounced countries that continuously ignore WHO's COVID-19 protocols, which are part of a coordinated global response.
And in some situations, there was a rejection of facts and an ignorance of the guidance. And when countries go in their own direction,
Immediately produce antivirus vaccines. Still, he warns the global community that an effective vaccine is not a silver bullet. Guterres said the vaccine cannot undo the damages brought by the pandemic. He sees aftershocks to last for decades. Aside from killing nearly 1.5 million people globally, Guterres noted that the COVID-19 crisis has resulted in extreme poverty and famine. This as the international community is now facing the biggest global recession.
Seminars, conventions, and similar events will now be allowed in GCQ areas at 30% capacity. In the IATF's latest guidelines, venues such as restaurants, hotels, function halls, event centers, and even private and government offices are required to adopt safety seals. The seal requires venues to make use of the Stay Safe application as well as install QR codes in entrances. The Tourism Department said the move will boost activity in the meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibitions, or the MICE sector. But as much as possible, the DOH still recommends that meetings and events be held through virtual means.
Kailangan lang po natin laging alalahanin, no? Unang-una, alam natin na nandyan pa rin yung virus. Kahit po na pinapayagan na yung mga ganitong mga activities, kailangan cautious and vigilant pa rin tayo.
The Public Works Department has just opened half of the 22-kilometer Boracay Circumferential Road in a bid to attract more tourists. Gerard de la Peña is in the destination island to give us updates. Gerard, how's Boracay looking now with that newly reopened road?
Yes, Robbie, the Public Works Department is also meant to make this place much more beautiful and much more attractive to tourists. Well, speaking of tourists, they have started to flock here once again, but with several requirements before arriving here and more protocols to follow once they get here. Well, coming here may be quite a hassle.
Izzy has been stuck in Manila since the lockdown began last March. So when it was announced that Boracay will reopen, she did not hesitate to book a flight. But Izzy underwent a tedious process before finally arriving to the island. But she has no regrets, so long as it eases her cabin fever.
And I just want to be with nature, and in Manila, all I do is just use the Wi-Fi, and if I can have strong Wi-Fi here, why not stay near the beach?
Tourists bound for Boracay must have negative swab test results 72 hours before their flight. They also have to fill out an online form and submit their confirmed plane and hotel bookings. Afterwards, they will be given a QR code to be presented before boarding, upon arrival in Caticlan or Calibo, and before riding the ferry going to the island. Lizzie finds the entire process discouraging.
The QR code could take a little bit longer. So like I also know friends that didn't get their QR code till the day of their flight. So yeah. So but I think a lot of people dread the swab.
To make these Boracay requirements less cumbersome, the Boracay Interagency Task Force vowed to subsidize the cost of swab tests for visitors. Some business owners have complained about the stringent requirements and are even appealing to lifting of tests. Locals like Alex, who rents out paddleboard.
Bukod sa bisita papasok dito, siyempre nag-iingat din kasi gawa sa pandemic, kailangan din pumasok bisita rito kasi sumunod sa protocol.
The local government noted that around 4,000 tourists went to Boracay last November, compared to none during the early months of the lockdown.
Nag-pick up na rin. Ayun lang, meron lang kami hiningi sa task force na yung ibang mga restrictions ay bawasan lang. No?
The DP Besos have a built-in drainage system which prevents flooding in the island. The road will reduce the 1-hour travel time from the port to the island by as much as 45 minutes.
Sinara natin ng Boracay, gusto rin namin pakita sa lahat na malaki yung ginawa ng gobyerno para ma-improve yung kondisyon ng Boracay.
Public Works Secretary Mark Villar said the remaining half of the circumferential road is slated for completion next year.
Well, Robbie, Boracay is practically COVID-free with no new cases since June of this year. Well, we've noticed that visitors are not taking their chances, so we've seen a lot of them still wearing their face masks even while walking by the beach. And curfew here still stands at restaurants and bars from 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. and partying is still prohibited by the beach. Robbie.
Maraming salamat, Gerard de la Peña. Let's pause for a quick break. When we return, Pfizer slashes by half its target production of vaccines for the year. This as raw materials are running short. And a look at the logo for FIBA's 2023 installment, which the country will host. The details next. Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. Lechoneros are seeing a slump in sales this year with fewer Filipinos, including the Christmas.
City rose up to 100 pigs every holiday season. But with the pandemic still around, the establishment and other lechoneros in the area,
wala ng trabaho, wala ng kita, kaya siguro po talagang hirap din po silang makabili ng lechon.
prices of lechon, which are currently at 6,000 to 9,000 pesos, are expected to increase in the coming weeks. The elevated prices of pork in Luzon are not helping. The Agriculture Department attributes this to the low supply in the market, as the pigs have been culled this year due to ASF. This forced pork sellers to look for supply in farther areas, adding another cost. All supplies in Luzon are now coming from Visayas and Mindanao.
Tuloy-tuloy po ang pagmamonitor po natin. Kundi po nangyari ito sa Iligan, bago po mangyari yun, almost 2 months na po, wala na po tayong bago na dagdag na probinsya sa ASF. Okay. Ibig sabihin po, naging vigilante.
Industriya ng agrikultura, it would take a long time before hog raisers fully recover from the ASF outbreak. For News 5, Camille Samonte, we are One News.
And now, the big stories in sports. Look at the game with Paolo Del Rosario.
Thanks, Robbie. Well, the FIBA Basketball World Cup has revealed its logo for the 2023 tournament. The logo's concept comes from 3 key elements: a heart, the Naismith Trophy, and the year 2023. For the first time in history, the tournament will be held in 3 host countries: Japan, Indonesia, and the Philippines.
I hope all of you will take pride, enjoy in not only seeing the logo, but in hosting the event, and particularly at this time of the year where it's Christmas and because of the pandemic.
It's very exciting because it's 1,000 days to the World Cup that will be held in the Philippines. But at the same time, I think if you look at the logo and you see the logo, there's a tinge of the puso that we all know of. No?
Government has played an essential role in securing the hosting rights of this World Cup, and I assure everyone that this administration will also play a vital part in making this historical event a success.
Meanwhile, the TNT Tropang Giga comes out victorious in Game 3 of the PBA Philippine Cup Finals, defeating Barangay Ginebra 88-67. Troy Rosario leads the way for the Tropang Giga with 15 points on a 7 out of 9 shooting night. TNT cuts Ginebra's lead to 2-1 with Game 4 scheduled on Sunday, 6 p.m. And you can catch it live on One Sports and on PBA Rush. And those were the latest from the game. Back to you, Robbie.
Global death toll from COVID-19 has surpassed 1.5 million as vaccine makers race against time to provide effective immunization against the virus. The United States tops the list with more than 270,000 casualties. They're followed by Brazil, which tallied at least 175 fatalities. India and Mexico each have recorded more than 100,000 deaths, while the United Kingdom leads Europe. Countries like Russia, China, and the United Kingdom have approved emergency use of experimental vaccines. The U.S. is expected to do the same for Pfizer and Moderna's vaccine candidates. Pfizer, however, slashed its production target for the year as it faces challenges in its supply chain for raw material. The pharmaceutical now expects to produce 50 million doses of its shots. That's down by half from its initial target. A new process for blood drives. In this bloodletting in Carmona, Cavite, donors go through a triage area where doctors check for COVID-19 symptoms. Doctors say such initiatives are important, especially for patients that need regular blood transfusion. The DOH says blood collection slumped by 40 to 50% during the pandemic.
Malaking bagay po na makapagbigay ng dugo kahit po may kinakaharap na pandemya. Tayo naman po ay susunod dun sa minimum health standards at safety protocols po na inilatag po hindi lang po ng kagawaran ng kalusugan, maging ng ating mga local government unit.
And that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again on Monday, 8 p.m., Signal Channels 8 and 250. Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. 21 days to go before Christmas. Tuloy pa rin ang Pasko, kapatid. I'm Robbie Alampay, and we are One News. Good evening.
Tayo'y maging liwanag ng Pasko. Tulong-tulong tayo. Tayo'y liwanag, ikaw at ako. Tuloy pa rin ang Pasko.